guys, we're back for the next episode of Fashion Meets History with Dami Davis. So before we get into the video, a few things. The A Little Bougie jacket, custom design jacket, is now available on damidavis.com. Everything is custom. You can design it exactly how you like, so definitely check it out. Next, it is Black History Month, and so of course it would not be right if we didn't shout out our African American fashion icons throughout the whole month. So each episode this month will be dedicated to a part of African American history and fashion. So without further ado, let's get started. I have a question for you guys. Do you know who said, "I love clothes and I'm particular about who wears them"? They sound a little bougie, don't they? Well, she was, and she's our fashion icon for the week, Mrs. Anne Lowe. So, for those of you who don't know, Anne Lowe is known as the first legitimate African American fashion designer during the 50s and 60s, so on and so forth. Like Mrs. Elizabeth Keckley in our first episode of Fashion Meets History, I'll attach the link here, Anne Lowe got her start as a seamstress in the South in Alabama. The skill was passed down from her grandmother to her mother. Being that she was born in 1898, her grandmother learned the skill set as an enslaved woman and later passed it on to her mother, who passed it on to her. However, growing up, all three women were able to turn their remarkable skill into an entrepreneurial business venture. In Alabama, her mother, herself, and her grandmother all designed for the most elite of Alabama society. Remarkable enough, Miss Lowe eventually took over the entire functioning and running of the business when she was 16, despite her ending her formal primary education at age 14. Around this same time period, Anne Lowe got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that she just could not pass up. Even though she and her family were well-known and prominent seamstresses, designers, however you want to call it, in Alabama, this opportunity had the oomph to skyrocket her career into what she became. So what was this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Well, while out one day, Anne Lowe ran into a prominent Floridian socialite who remarked on Anne Lowe's remarkable style and work and technique. Astounded by her chic and clean lines, this prominent socialite invited Anne Lowe to become her exclusive stylist to her twin daughters who were being married. Back in the day, when women got married, they got what was called a trousseau. It entailed about 2 weeks worth of garments for the wedding and after the wedding. So the wedding gown itself, that of the bridal party, nightgowns and things of that nature for the honeymoon, so on and so forth. So this was a big job. Obviously not one that Anne Lowe hadn't tackled before. It was who ordered the job that was more important. As with most young women in the South, Anne Lowe got married young. So when she brought this opportunity to her then husband, he, being a man, didn't like the idea very much. At that time, she and her husband had a son, Arthur Lowe, and he really wanted her to stay and be a housewife, even though she was currently running her family's business in Montgomery. Like any woman with a plan and a will and a way, Anne Lowe said, "See you later," to her mans and moved her and her son to Tampa, Florida to take the job. Anne Lowe did what she came to do in Tampa. Her exclusive spot with the Tampa socialite was not her only client by far in Florida. And like in Alabama, she was able to design for the most elite of Tampa society. Well, a few years later, Anne Lowe figured she did all she could do in Tampa for the time being. She really wanted to try her teeth at becoming a real designer. So she packed up, she and Arthur, and moved to New York. In 1917, she enrolled in the S.T. Taylor Design School. Contrary to a lot of people's belief, New York was just as segregated and racist as the pits of Alabama and Florida. After all, it was federal law. Not saying it's right, it just was. So in a segregated setting, Anne Lowe skyrocketed above her peers with her talent, intelligence, and acumen. The truth is that Anne Lowe surpassed many of her white counterparts during her time in college, but she wasn't able to receive the recognition that she deserved. Something that can be attributed to a lot of African American people during that time. But she didn't let it stop her. She just did what she had to do flawlessly and rose above everyone, literally. Anne Lowe graduated in about a year and a half, record time for most all of her other peers enrolled in design school at the same time. After obtaining her degree, she moved back to Tampa in about 1920 and officially opened her first salon as a degreed designer, if you will. It was known as the Anne Cone Boutique. And being a little bougie as she was, she only dealt with the very best clientele, and she only made the most extravagant dresses and designs. Her boutique was known for designing cotillion, wedding, and formal ball gowns. Like Miss Elizabeth Keckley, Anne Lowe didn't work alone. She was a boss lady, honey. She had about 18 seamstresses working under her at her first salon in Tampa. Miss Lowe's work spoke for itself. The heights of Tampa society flocked to have a custom Anne Lowe design. She did so well that eventually she set aside her aspirations in Tampa to return to New York and legitimately conquer the city with her design prowess. Between her return to Tampa and her decision to move back to New York in 1928, which was about a span of 8 years, Miss Lowe had resourced about $20,000. Some was from profit and some were donations and loans from organizations like Alpha Phi Alpha, one of the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities of African American culture. But if you know anything about history, you know that 1928 was a little too no time to start a business, especially in New York City, because 2 years later, the stock market crashed, landing us in the Great Depression. Now, little is known about what Anne Lowe did to prosper her brand during the Great Depression or to keep her and Arthur afloat, but we do know that she did. Like this day and age, the Great Depression didn't affect everyone. It affected a lot of people and a lot of wealthy and prominent families, but not all of them. Think back to the movie Annie, right? Daddy Warbucks was rolling in dough, okay? And he was out here adopting all the orphans. He had money. So just that train of thought. That was Anne Lowe's clientele. My girl knew quality and knew whose wallet to hit to get her back. So she didn't have live-in jobs like she did when she got her start in Tampa. She worked with luxury fashion chains like Henri Bendel, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Neiman Marcus, who were big names in the 1920s and 30s, just like they are today. However, like her education, it was still the time of segregation in America. So no matter how beautiful and elegant and classic and classy and iconic her designs were, she was not allowed to put her name on them. Anne Lowe was denied proper compensation and recognition for all of her work that was not directly from a boutique she or her family owned until about the late 1950s, early 1960s. After the Depression, we move into World War II. And during this time period, Anne Lowe pretty much did the same things for work. She worked for the same types of luxury chains until about 1950, when she and her then grown son Arthur decided to try their hat at their 1928 dream once again to finally open her own boutique in New York City. it was donned Anne Lowe's gowns. And like every other part of her career, you had to be somebody to get in. During this time period, the 50s and 60s, her most notable works are that of Jackie Bouvier Kennedy from last week's episode and award-winning actress Olivia de Havilland. If you don't know who Olivia de Havilland is, she's most well known for her role as Melanie Wilkes, or Melly, in Gone with the Wind. All of this buzz around her amazing works, as well as movement with civil rights activism and the eventual end of segregation, Anne Lowe started to receive the credit and recognition that she really had deserved for the past 20, 30, 40 years. Top fashion magazines like Vogue and Vanity Fair started featuring her work, as well as shining an artist spotlight on her herself. Many European designers like Dior were enamored with her work and didn't hesitate to give her the credit of being one of the top designers of that time period, probably even today. But one of her first media spotlights can be attributed to Ebony magazine. In the African American community, Ebony and Essence were basically started to give our people the recognition and the credit they deserved. A lot of times, our articles and research and our creatives are then picked up and put into mainstream media like Vogue and Vanity Fair, which was a similar formula that happened to Anne Lowe. And it's positive because her name was now on the world stage, but let's just remember to give credit where credit is due. Even though Ebony and Jet are in all our parents' houses, and we just kind of see them as the little magazines we flip through in the bathroom sometimes, they really held a prominent place in African American culture and shaped so many things in media and entertainment and activism, especially during that time period. Despite all the fame and recognition and accolades that she was finally getting credit for, Anne Lowe really wasn't seeing any profit. Unfortunately, that can be said about a lot of prominent African American figures in media and fashion and entertainment during the eras before and directly after segregation. I mean, Taraji and Viola fighting now for equal pay for Black women. So you can only imagine what it was like then. But being the boss that she was, she didn't let that deter her. She always had business, and she always remains exclusive. Her brand was exclusivity and elegance and decadence, and she wouldn't let that drop for anybody. So when her salon eventually closed in the 60s, she went back to what she did during the Great Depression in the 40s, and she did probate work for Saks. However, this time she was able to put her name on her designs and get credit for her work, but the check still wasn't checking. Eventually, Anne Lowe got enough of us peasants and retired in 1972 after closing and reopening her salon in New York a few times. Between 1972 and her death in 1981, Anne Lowe experienced severe eye problems for both her right and left eye, which greatly interfered with how she was able to do her work, but it didn't deter her completely. Anne Lowe died in 1981 at the age of 82. And that is the story of one of the greatest African American fashion influences and one of the most renowned and elite American designers and fashion icons. Let's get into the fashion. Anne Lowe was known for all custom works of art. Everything was custom and made to order. Basic epitome of haute couture. As mentioned, she worked with only the best. She had a very, very selective clientele everywhere she went, from Montgomery to Tampa to New York. Only the best of the best. In New York, we're talking the Bouviers, Jackie Kennedy, the Roosevelts, like the president, the Rockefellers, cha-ching. She knew where to get paid. Factors like her sheer talent, her use of the best and most elegant fabrics, and her stitching and sewing styles all contributed to her high price point. Anne Lowe was known to have mastered the trapunto technique, which is a specialized method of quilting. As mentioned before, some of her most notable works are Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress to JFK and Olivia de Havilland's Academy Award nightgown. But what I didn't mention was that Anne Lowe was also known for a little something else. In the late 50s, an up-and-coming brand custom inaugural gowns from our former First Ladies. You might recognize these as the gowns that are featured in the Smithsonian Institute today. Anne Lowe contributed about 6 gowns to the Smithsonian. While I can't say for sure which of the 6 First Ladies inaugural gowns Anne Lowe did rework and reimagine, she gets the credit for it nonetheless. Anne Lowe lived a remarkable life. Despite living in Montgomery, Alabama, one of the worst segregated cities in the Jim Crow era, she and her family thrived as prominent entrepreneurs. She mastered her skill set, dominated her peers, and launched several exclusive salons. That's no small feat. She was a woman with class and grace, and you could see all of that throughout her work, both that I read earlier in this video. I love clothes, and I'm particular about who wears them. Really is Anne Lowe's legacy in a nutshell. She gave us timeless pieces, timeless works of art. She was a fashion icon. She designed iconic fashion statements, and only the best of the best could be seen wearing them. She'd be designing at the Met Gala with Anna Wintour. She remains known to those of us who love fashion, but her name is often forgotten in history. So I hope you got a little something out of Anne Lowe's story and you can spread the word, especially this month. That's our episode for this week. Next week we'll have another African American fashion icon to dive into. Until next time, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Please comment any of your thoughts or suggestions on more videos, and definitely remember to check out DamiDavis.com to get your unique design. Until next time.